So Mark, you've seen the video, reviewed the footage. Of course, the interesting thing here is that the perp ended up being a 13-year-old kid, ended up being unarmed. And so I think some people might go, but wait a minute, was there objective, reasonable evidence of a deadly threat here to point a gun at somebody? So in an overall sense, what do you think of his actions?
Well, I think that he pointed the gun at this guy under these circumstances. I think he's going to get a pass on that. Had he pulled the trigger, much harder call.
Much harder call.
Much harder call. You could even make the case that pointing the gun at him under these circumstances is problematic too, right? Because, I mean, all you got is a guy walks in the store, he's wearing a mask and he refuses to take it off. And pointing a gun isn't a nothing, right? Pointing a gun is a threat of deadly physical force. And under most circumstances, not all, but most, you don't get to do that unless you've got an imminent threat of death or serious physical injury. I also note on this video, it looked to me, maybe this is just a training point, you'll have a lot more to say about this than me, but looked to me like when the guy was pointing the firearm at him, he had his finger on the trigger, and that makes me a little nervous too.
Yeah, we always say keep your finger off the trigger until you've made the conscious decision to fire, right? And
yeah, because this could have been an accidental discharge pretty easily as well, so that made me a little bit nervous. But, you know, under the law, you're still threatening deadly force, whether you've got your finger on the trigger or not.
Point a gun at somebody.
You're pointing a gun at somebody, and you're supposed to have some justification. But, you know, it's the sufficient justification. But under these circumstances, and indeed, this guy didn't get charged, right? But do we know if he called the police?
He did. He ended up calling the cops and holding that kid. So he went outside and then went to the store next door to warn that guy, found the kid in there cowering in that guy's store, basically took him into custody at that point and detained him, called 911, cops came and picked him up.
Yeah, maybe this is a lawyering point, I don't know, but if this guy had called me, right, if we could sort of press pause after the bad guy runs out, and then he calls me and we've got some time and I can review the video and he says, Mark, should I call the police? I might have said, I think I just let it go.
Wow, because you could maybe have some trouble yourself.
I wouldn't risk it.
And certainly, the kid he pointed a gun at's not going to call the cops.
Well, you'd never know. I could imagine, he says, look, I don't know if there's an argument. I was out playing with my friends and we had a mask on and I forgot I had the mask and I just walked in this guy's store and he points a gun at me. If that's the call that comes into 911, the cops are going to come down and say, did you pull a gun on this? You know, then it's a little bit dicey. So if I'm him, I think I'm comfortable just, if he's not calling the police, maybe I'm not calling the police. And I'm damn sure not going to go out the front door looking for him. I can tell you that.
And I did say that in the video.
Absolutely.
Don't go outside.
You were on point right there.
Don't do that.
I think I'm going to lock the door at that point and I'm closed for a little while and make sure the storm blows over. And I don't know that I'm going to call the police down to review that video because the problem is if they find a problem, and it's close, right? I think at the end of the day, we're probably okay. But it's close, and I could imagine, you know, if you could pitch this to 100 prosecutors, the number's not going to be 0 in terms of the prosecutors that are going to want to prosecute this case.
Yeah, so, you know, in his particular town, rough town in Connecticut, a lot of crime in the area. He said when the cops showed up, they reviewed the footage and they were like, yeah, whatever, dude, we're not going to give you a hard time about this.
Be interesting to know if they submitted it to the prosecutor. Because,
I don't think they did.
Yeah, because see, this is sort of check one on the system, right? If the police, and this is supposed to be this way, right? Because if the police officers don't think there's a crime, they don't need to send it on. If they think there's a crime, they can send it on, and now we have another opportunity with the prosecutor looking at it. But sometimes if I get in early, I talk to the police and I say, hey, maybe you don't even need to send this to the prosecutor. And sometimes they say, well, we have to, and other times it's like, no, we don't think there's a problem here. So we don't know exactly what happened in this case, but you know, the argument could be made that all you got here, you don't have any reason to think he's armed. Maybe he's got a scary mask, and maybe he says, I didn't hear the guy. I had the mask on. I couldn't hear him say anything. I never heard him tell me, take the mask off. I don't know. You could imagine other justifications. This could be some holiday, maybe some religious holiday. Maybe it's close to Halloween. Maybe they're having some kind of a party. Maybe, I don't know. But to just say, all you really got, I mean, I could see a prosecutor saying, ladies and gentlemen, you don't get to pull a gun on somebody just because they're wearing a mask.
So there's a challenge. Now, so maybe there's another idea from a tactical perspective here that we've talked about this on the Extra channel because of the speed of it, that there is a time to point a gun, but you can display a firearm without pointing it, and you do probably have some more protection when you're doing that in your own place of business than when you're out in public.
Yeah, I think I like, and I don't know what happened here, but I think I like better, hey man, I got a gun, stop right there. Hey man, I got a gun, stop right there before I see this.
Hey, low ready, something like that. It's not pointed directly at him.
I like to see an escalation, to starting with a lower level of force, and then because then we can say, look, he tried everything. He's not a yahoo. He didn't just go straight to pointing the gun at the guy with finger on the trigger just because he didn't take the mask off. Now he doesn't know it's a 13-year-old kid, but you can imagine if the 13-year-old kid was to call the cops. I'm a 13-year-old kid. I'm playing with my friends. I wore a mask, and some bad man pointed a gun at me and threatened to kill me. The cops are going to come down and question this guy, pull that tape. I don't know how that's going to go.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day here, we expect the law to say, okay, so we want good people to do good things, and we recognize who the good guy is here. It's a guy who's just minding in his own business, in his own store. He's not trying to cause problems or anything like that. And so, thankfully he gets a little more benefit of the doubt. But we're expected to act in reasonable ways.
Yeah, and you don't want to take that too far, right? Because just because you're a good guy doing what you think is the right thing, there's a limit, right? A prosecutor at some point is going to say, even though you thought you were doing the right thing, you used too much force too quickly. Now, I don't think that this necessarily is over the line. I think probably
it's kind of straddling the line a little.
It's close to the line, but my guess here, and it's hard to tell, right? Because every circumstance is completely different. We don't know exactly what he would say. We don't know exactly what the kid would say, or there might be some circumstances that could change the analysis either way. But I think that it's a close enough call that my thought would be if the police don't know about it, maybe it's better everybody goes their own way and we don't take a strict scrutiny look at this thing.
So I will say I have a friend. How about this? Can I tell a quick I have a friend story?
It's your channel, man. You tell whatever story you like.
I have a friend who I know whose only time that he ever had a firearm on somebody was an incident that the police were not called on. Because no firearm was discharged, and the person that he had the firearm on scampered off to another direction and found better things to do with his life. And my friend just put his firearm away and never called that into the police because he didn't want to have any problems with how that might look and the he said, she said of it. And so I'm not saying that that's the right answer in your circumstance. You got to see that. Certainly if you discharge a firearm, you better be the first one on the phone with 911. In my opinion, because the cops in Arizona are on the way.
Again, I'm going to give the it depends answer, right? Because there are certain circumstances, and we've had these circumstances in our office before. This is something, and I know I've said it before, and probably worth saying again, this idea of a negligent discharge. People think, oops, it's an accident. They don't understand that this particular variety of an accident, right? To sort of set the stage, right? Maybe you're cleaning your weapon and you forgot there was one in the chamber because you're negligent, right? And then, oops, you discharged around, and maybe it just...
Yeah, that would be dumb to call the cops on if nobody got hurt or anything. Just be stupid to call the police.
People do.
Yeah, but don't do that.
And the police come down and they say, oh, we see you, thanks for calling us. We see you had a negligent discharge. Maybe you shot it into your own ceiling or the floor or whatever. Nobody else would know about it. But you called the police, and what you bought in Arizona was a Class 6 dangerous felony mandatory prison type of a charge. So there might be times it's better just to leave it alone. And so you have to make that decision. If nobody else knows about it, maybe you call a lawyer and we think it through carefully and we decide what the best course of action is. Because you have to remember, too, as much as our justice system does a great job, it's not foolproof.
No.
People get charged. People get convicted who are innocent.
Yeah.
And it does happen. And so maybe not everybody needs to know everything all the time.
Interesting. I think that's interesting advice. It's not the direction I thought we were going on this one. But
just on another side note, since we go off tangents sometimes, I had a guy in my office just in the last few days and got pulled over and voluntarily had a firearm in his car and said, I thought I had to do that. And I said, no, you don't. No, you don't. Normally not a problem, but there are so many things that could be a problem, right? I've had people in my career who have innocently thought they were fine, and as it turned out, there was a serial number that was maybe scratched off,
Defaced,
or
yeah.
there was a barrel a little bit too short, or even more common, some people are prohibited possessors and have no idea that they're prohibited possessors.
Don't know it.
There is a huge group of people out there in our country who got into some kind of an argument with their spouse at some time, and the police came and they maybe were arrested, and the judge said, hey, you plead guilty to this and pay a $200 fine, and it's all done. And the whole thing ended in 24 hours, and they forgot about it because it was 20 years ago. But they're still prohibited possessors
Misdemeanor
today.
domestic violence. Yeah.
Misdemeanor domestic violence. And you can fix that here in Arizona. In some states, you can fix it. But until it's fixed, you're still a prohibited possessor.
Yeah.
And you got a gun in a way that didn't require a background check. And so you might be carrying a gun and being a prohibited possessor. To volunteer, hey, officer, I'm just letting you know I got a gun, and then they run that and figure out you're a prohibited possessor, the gun was stolen, there's some other problem, they didn't like the way you were storing it or something like that.
Yeah.
Why open that can of worms? With the important exception, I believe if you got a gun on you and the police officer's patting you down, don't let them find it and be surprised about a firearm. So I want to be super clear about this.
Yeah.
We do not want officers who are about to find a firearm to be surprised about that. So even I would say, look, officer, is you going to pat me down? Just want to let you know I got a firearm here or there, whatever, just because I don't want any surprises.
Well, and of course, we want to be cautious because we have viewers in every state in the union. Some states require you to notify an officer upon immediate contact. If you live in that state or you're visiting one of those states, then follow the law.
Excellent
You don't want to
point.
get jammed up on that either. Here in Arizona, where I live, no duty. If they ask, you have to answer honestly.
Yeah, and it makes it very difficult because we have so many different laws, different interpretations of things. So it's very hard. But, I say if you're going to carry a firearm, it's all fun and games to get a gun and to go to the range. But understand, you've just availed yourself the obligation to know what the law is in the state that you're in.
Yep.
And the same is true with people who have these concealed weapons permits with reciprocity and they're going to another state and they just assume that the law in that other state is the same as theirs. Look, if you're going to carry in another state, you are subject to that other state's laws. You better know what they are.
So I just, this last weekend I flew into Omaha, Nebraska. We were in Sioux City, Iowa. I spent a little bit of time in South Dakota and all those, and you got to know the laws in each place, and they're a little different.
Quick story, I had a guy with a CCW, concealed weapon, and he was traveling across country, and he had his course all charted out, knew every state, he did exactly what he was supposed to do. Then he got lost, and he was in one of those areas where the four corners, there's different states, and he wandered into Nebraska, didn't know, got pulled over there, and the rules are different there, and sure enough, got charged with a firearms offense, and guess who wound up going to Nebraska?
Yeah, right.
But
Well, Marc,
still, you got to be very careful. It's it's all fun and games, but there are big responsibilities, which is why we're preaching to the choir, talking to the people who are listening on this channel. But it would be a good service to all of us if the people on this channel who are watching this would talk to their friends and family members and other people who got guns and say, look, this is a serious legal responsibility. You're going to be held to the same standard as people who know the law very, very well, so you better know what it is.
well, or maybe share a video like this with them as a shameless plug. Marc, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.